Transmission. It is November 7th, 2024, 1300 hours. Is anybody out there? This is the Blue Iron Lion broadcasting from somewhere. Today, I want to talk about strength, the importance of being physically strong. I am a big proponent for strength training and being physically strong. But now I am also a believer into each his own, right? Just because I am big on it, I don't expect everyone else to be. So to my strength training enthusiasts out there, this one's for you. In fact, let's go back in time, shall we? Let's go back to a time where movies and TV shows embodied what almost every young man wanted to grow up to emulate. Yeah? G.I. Joe, Rambo, Terminator, Action Jackson, Mr.T, who always pitied the fool, and the A-Team, Miami Vice, Knight Rider, Star Wars, Luke and Vader, right? Rocky and Apollo, the $6 Million Man, or was it the Bionic Man? No, I think it was the $6 Million Man. You know, all the shows from that era that celebrated what it was to be a strong, tough guy, right? Saturday Morning Kung Fu, The Last Dragon, Bruce Leroy, and the baddest, Show Enough. I mean, I could go on and on. Karate Kid with Mr. Miyagi, all right? Against Cobra Kai, Show No Mercy. I gotta stop. I mean, true, these shows happen to correlate with a more violent era. I guess if we move up to the 90s, we could include the Power Rangers, but that was a bit after my impressionable TV time. But you got it. You get the gist. And now it is time for a little childhood trauma. So throughout my 30s and early 40s, I eventually hulked up to about 230 pounds of raw powerlifting muscle. But back then I was the skinny kid. And like I pointed out in the last video growing up, I would shrink when the louder kid would beat on his chest. Yeah, I remember even as far back as third grade, there was this kid in my school that was like 2 grades above, right? This real tough kid. I remember he walked through the playground one time with no shirt on. And me, being this little sort of scary kid, I remember thinking, oh man, I do not want trouble with that kid. You know, the bravado he walked around with, even at that age. And then one day, sometime later in the school year, I'll never forget, I was walking out of school, me and a few friends, and that kid approached me aggressively, talking about some problem, something about some girl. And I remember I was like, who? Me? Right? And then one of his boys was like, no, not him, and pointed out to this other kid from my class that I also perceived to be pretty tough himself. And I'm like, oh, thank God. And so they would have a fight, except it wasn't a fight because it was more like a massacre. Remember I said the no-shirt kid was 2 grades above us, right? Well, by the end of the ordeal, he had not a scratch on him. I couldn't say the same for the kid from my class, as he was leaking blood all over the pavement, threatening to get his older brother. After seeing the kid from my class get beaten to a pulp, I thought, what if that was me? I very quickly came to the conclusion that, yeah, I was not that guy. In fact, for years, I didn't even think it was genetically possible for me to put on any type of muscle mass like the heroes I saw on the television screen. Even in junior high, my nickname was Bones, and named up to me by some of the other boys. I embraced it. It wasn't a bullying type thing at the time. It was my peers I associated with. Like I remember one day hearing, oh man, he's so skinny, man. How are you so skinny? Huh? We gonna call you Bones. Yeah, Bones. Yo, Bones. You know, that sort of thing. I mean, they didn't call me that all the time, just every now and again. I guess to remind me of how skinny I was. Sophomoric humor from the guys. It was not until 1998 that I got a full gym membership in an effort to finally gain some type of strength. And in that gym, I was virtually the youngest, weakest guy there, which is to be expected when you are first starting out. When you're a young guy just starting out in the gym, for you young guys out there, don't feel discouraged. When I first entered the gym, nobody ever mocked me or made me feel as though I had no business there. Everybody I noticed in that gym environment was very either to themselves or they were encouraging. I was 19, weighed 160, and could only bench 135 for 3. It was rare for me to see a man bench 225, which was my goal, ever since back in high school when I saw an adult football staff member bench that for 10 reps in the background, while the weightlifting coach was giving a lecture on weightlifting safety. If I could only hit 225 for 1 rep, I'd feel powerful. That's what I thought. So imagine my amazement one day when I saw these 2 guys walk into the gym a few years later and rep 315. 315? You got to understand that this was way before YouTube. To see 3 45-pound plates on each side of the bar back then for me was like watching Larry Wheels in action. That would be the equivalent. It was unheard of. Yeah, it was done somewhere out there, but you didn't see it. Think about how many people in your local gym today you see doing that for one, save for a powerlifting gym where the number increases slightly. All in all, you didn't see it. Fast forward and it started to become, I guess, more commonly seen thanks to the internet, with more people pushing their limits after seeing what was possible. Today, 405 is like the new 315 as far as rarity in seeing it offline. And even then, don't let the keyboard bench press champions stating that they could bench 405 when they were in junior high school fool you with that nonsense. They're like, these 405 benchers, they're like the billionaires of strength. To put the context, there are almost 3,000 billionaires in the world. If all of them posted their status on the net, it'd feel like everyone's a billionaire. I know my ratio is off, but so what? You get my point. Actually, the straw that broke the camel's back for me, well, not the main reason, but I remember I was in the elevator with my then girlfriend, and these 2 bigger guys walked into the elevator. They started laughing about something. My guess, something that happened previous that they were privy to. So we're in the elevator, my girlfriend and I, and it's quiet, except for these 2 guys and their steady snickering between themselves on a now long elevator ride. My own insecurity alarm started to kick in, and I started to almost feel like, are they still laughing about something else, or has their focus shifted to us on some, what is she doing with this young skinny kid, I know, ridiculous, but you guys out there got to cut me some slack. My ex at the time had a serious natural beauty that got attention many places we went. Like the time she and I was walking past a club and some drunk guy in a doorway started talking crap. Now, side note, we didn't walk around till I was getting disrespected on the regular. Just this guy appeared drunk, so it was more overt. Plus, I'm 20, weighing $160, so that couldn't have helped, where a good portion of the adult male population were bigger and older than me. And yeah, I know guns were invented back then, but I wasn't the type. I'm not O-Dog. Besides, even if I had access to one back then, somehow, throwing my life away because I had to hide behind a gun for lack of size didn't seem to be the move. Right? True, there's a lot of lightweight guys out there with the heart of a lion. I was one of them. And I have had fights. Truth is, though, those fights were far and few in between, and most guys were not bothering to get physically strong, so it was anybody's match. I wasn't concerned about those guys. I was talking about those breed of men that were visibly dense around the neck area. Like that character Bugs Bunny had to wrestle with. The Crusher. Right? Debo. That type of guy. I happened upon a YouTube prison story recommended to me on my feed for some reason, where 2 cellmates, a brolic dude and a much smaller dude, got into it during lockdown. Or actually, the bigger dude took advantage of the smaller dude, to which, before that incident, they were cool. The other inmates were upset because they could hear everything. Tried to yell out for the CEO and everything, but no one answered, and no one could do anything because everyone's cells were locked. This went on for hours. Bill Feasy, that was the channel. The guy's a very good storyteller, basically telling stories of his redemption from prison. Side note, I checked out a few other of his stories, far removed from what I was just described, but I had to stop listening because his storytelling capabilities are so good, it's immersive. You start to feel like you're doing time in the prison he's describing without the danger of the drama, of course. And anyone that knows anything about the esoterics, if your mind spends too much time in an environment, then you might find yourself in that environment. But as to the initial story, what disturbed me the most was hearing the narrator, Bill Feasy, describe how they could hear the small guy attempt to fight back, but became overwhelmed by the fatigue of trying to fight off a guy well over 2 times his size. So yeah, that much smaller guy had the heart of a lion, according to the story, but that did not seem to matter when his cellmate decided it was time. Okay? Size matters to counter the keyboard warriors out there. Speaking of keyboard warriors, I'm old enough to remember when the shaming culture took hold. Sometime around the early 2010s, give or take, there was this big anti-man shaming movement, like a shift in mainstream agenda that was on steroids. And I remember specifically that wanting to go to the gym and get stronger suggested that you were compensating for something, or like a virtual scoff. And this is where you see the comments suggesting that the insert your martial art here crowd would taunt the reason why size and muscle didn't matter, because Bruce Lee existed once. In other words, to suggest that a smaller guy would decimate a bigger guy due to fighting technique, which was ironic because every dedication to bettering one's physical abilities took a time of years and dedication and discipline that a vast majority of those naysayers online didn't have anyway. No, what happened is that they were more than likely intimidated by the Debo-looking dude, and so they had to latch on to a size similar to their own that could perform something remarkable. There are always outliers, okay, which are far and few between, which is why a smaller guy defeating a massive opponent goes viral. But the vast majority of the rest of the world do not train in jiu-jitsu. And besides, you think the jiu-jitsu guy or the boxer doesn't train to get stronger? I mean, if we want to talk about extremes, you take a guy like Mariusz Pudzianowski, who was an absolute machine in a strongman competition, then later converting over to MMA against more experienced fighters, still having more than double the wins than losses. It speaks for itself, and in his weight class. Strength and size matters. A stronger you is a more durable and denser you. The 230-pound me that I once was would absolutely manhandle the 165-pound me. That is the point. Hell, in my prime, if I added serious cardio, I'd have felt like Batman. And besides all that, there's a good feeling when you know that you can break a barrier by lifting something that you once could not. You feel like the Rocky IV training montage, hearts on fire, right? Thinking back to the disparaging online attitude on strength training and to the other masculine endeavors, actually, knowing what we know now, I wouldn't be surprised if a good portion of those comments were programs from the deep state assigned to shape public opinion. Yeah, that's what it was. An agenda to blur the lines between masculinity and toxic masculinity. No, there is a fine line. To my men out there that knows masculinity, right? Real masculinity, strength, leadership or fellowship, respectfulness, protectiveness, etc. Toe the line. Masculinity becomes toxic when it becomes unnecessarily aggressive or when we mock those that are vulnerable. That type thing. Not two boys play wrestling in a backyard like that controversial Gillette commercial suggested. Give me a break. All a big psyop. So keep strong. Strength train. Yeah, I know guns exist. Knives exist. Hell, I got stabbed before. But I put up one hell of a fight. I wasn't even big yet, but my body was conditioned from strength training. I was 165 pounds of lean, grappling with 2 guys. My homeboy at the time was dealing with the third. And even at my weight, I remember walking these guys against the car as we continued like punching around. The adrenaline caused me not to feel a thing. Well, until I got to the hospital. But yeah, even the doctor said I had a remarkable recovery. I attribute that to the strength training. That after being stabbed and having a punctured lung. Oh yeah, I did start to have labored breathing on the way to the hospital due to that. But fond memories of my early 20s. Oh, wait, I can't forget. For women, too. How can I forget the story of the young woman who was working out in the gym by herself and some crazy psychopath walked in and just tried to, force himself on her and tackled her to the ground? She was able to fight him off and keep him off her until she could get away. All right, he was later arrested. Her strength training and her grit is what saved her from a likely worse situation. It made the news. Just search woman fights off attacker in the gym. So good on her. It's not just a man thing. It's a strength thing. I couldn't close out without a tip for you ectomorphs out there to gain strength and size. For years I was a hard gainer in the gym. From age 19 to 32, I gained some strength, some size. I looked chiseled, but that wasn't the result I wanted. I wanted to become a barbarian. Eventually, I did hit that 225 one rep bench max, but plateaued no matter what I did or how much I ate, or so I thought. It was not until I started measuring how much calories I was taking in did the magic happen. See, when you've naturally a high metabolism or used to eating light, your body knows nothing else. Not even the extra food that you think is enough is enough. Your body is just going to recalibrate, and maybe you eat even less in the day going forward. Before the apps, I kept a list in my pocket of all the foods I normally ate and how much calories. I wasn't even checking nutrition yet. Dirty bulking, fast food, versus clean bulking, whole foods or home cooked. I was just eating. I can't leave out that my wife at the time always cooked, so I had a blend of both. I don't suggest just dirty bulking because it could lead to health issues down the line. But yeah, I did fill up with the fast foods during work hours. What happened was that I blew up so fast in strength and size, 165, 174. I couldn't believe it. 180, 190s. People noticed wow, it felt like I imagined what steroids would be. 205. Understand that 180 was my dream weight. But a word of caution. One, I got overexcited when I found the correlation between enough calorie intake and size. Went out and got a weight gainer to stuff myself with 700 extra calories than I was used to in a day, thinking the more I take, the faster the result. That was the first week. Well, it resulted in me grabbing my stomach all night, wondering if I was going to explode like the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. No, gradually. So if you're used to taking 1,000 calories per day, go for 1,100 to 1,200 that day. It adds up at the end of the week. The other caution was that, fine, I spent years increasing my calories, and by this time had a more calibrated nutrition and got to the point where I was incline benching 300 pounds, deadlifting 565, squatting 440, benching 315 for 4. These numbers are just not to boast, but to show you guys what is possible. This was by mid-30s. Natural, focusing on powerlifting. Yours is always stronger, but this is compared to where I came from. By early 40s, my bench declined to 315 for 1, but that was due to a shoulder injury, benching with a bodybuilder's bench as opposed to a powerlifting bench. All these are lessons for you to take. I still kept my squat and deadlift though. That's the other caution. As the bench gets heavier, you may want to switch to a more supportive bench, or actually start with that. Additional note is that when I spent years knowing how to increase calories, it started getting away from me, and I kept gradually increasing the calories, more calories than strength. This is when the impossible happened. I got the Santa Claus belly and was getting no stronger than what I listed. So balance calories intake with the strength. I should have pushed my strength to near plateau before I kept adding even more calories. It was only after the pandemic that I lost the stomach and dropped down to 207. The above method doesn't apply to you Samoan type dudes. You would be a whole different plan I know nothing about. All that was just for people like me who thought I was genetically disposed to always being skinny. Some guys, they put a potato chip in their mouth and they blow up. Different style. Lastly, I do notice a reemergence of young guys embracing their masculinity and young people embracing the gym in general. Remember, there is nothing wrong with being strong. It literally saved my life, perhaps twice. If you don't care for it, then that's fine. That's for you. All this applies to a free society. I mean, all of this might not be motivational in an ultra-violent environment where, say, a 10-year-old can, like, pop your head off with a revolver that his gang gave him, right? And there's no police around. City of God type cinema. Place like that, I admit, you'd probably be better off training your aim than lifting weights. But if you've made it this far, my guess is that we're on the same page on this one. I don't know any guy or woman, for that matter, that doesn't want to feel stronger and capable. For any of us that could make it to an older age, it would be the difference between feeling capable by then or being disabled by osteoporosis. Stay strong. For anybody out there that care to listen. End transmission.